glommed on that. See, he said the word dogma. That proves science is a religion.
That's like the first thing you learn in biology is central dogma of biology, right?
There was
early.
I hate to do this to you, Aron, but we get so many posts about it that I feel like it's necessary to address for the one person that you might be able to reach, and that is explaining what Kent got wrong about the word kinds, because I see that every day. There's a post about comment or it from kinds, like, well, he still couldn't explain what kinds meant, or you still can't say that a dog will come from a not dog. And I know that you've done
what
it to
kind
death,
of dog?
but exactly.
What kind of dog is it? Is it a hound? Is it a terrier? Is one of the toys? Is it one of the working dogs? What kind of dog are we talking about? The word kind can just apply to every damn thing, right? What kind of wrench do you have? Is that what kind of screwdriver? Is that Phillips or flathead? So the word kind is very ambiguous in all other applications. But when we're talking about evolution versus creationists and what do they call I forget what their replacement for phylogenetics.
Baroninology.
Yes. So when we're talking about that, then there's a distinction. And I repeated this 50 times during your show. Yeah. That a kind differs from a mere phylogenetic clade in one respect. If you want to say that you already have a parent category of rodents, and from that you get a different kind of rodent, and that's called a squirrel, or as Kent Hovind put it, squirrel. you might have 200 different species of squirrel, but they will always be squirrels, which of course are always going to be rodents, right? So the kind never changed, just became a squirrel, but it's still a rodent. So you have all these other rodents, and they're all the same kind. Well, no. If a rodent began, or if a squirrel began from a parent category of rodents, that's not a kind. That's a clade. The difference between a kind and a clade is that the squirrel didn't come from a rodent. The squirrel came from magic.
Boom.
Abracadabra, boom. God spoke squirrel into existence.
Get yourself a glass of water.
Even if that was the case, how do you get 200 different variations of squirrel, chipmunks, marmots, whatever? I mean, how many groundhogs, prairie dogs? These are all types of squirrels, right? They're all types of rodents. How do you get so much variety in only 7,000 years to explain all that? Or did God keep
biogenesis?
God couldn't have created each one separately, right? So if he created one squirrel kind, how do we get the different types of
macroevolution? It's funny watching Kent Hovind's own presentations where he talks about ring species, and he talks about how new species develop that are not able to breed with their parent or sister groups anymore. So that's the creation of a new clade from an ancestral clade. So he understands all that. He gets all that. He's arguing for an evolutionary position, but is too damn dumb to realize that that's what he's doing.
And, I should mention ring species. I might want to bring this up because I just had this discussion the other day. There are people actually that say there's no such thing as a ring species. And what they're doing is they misunderstand what Jerry Coyne's saying. Jerry Coyne wrote about this. He had a study that he was paid to do. And he found that there's no true ring species. In other words, there's always going to be hybridizations and gene flow and other things affecting the structure of the ring. But he admitted they're still ring species. And so there are creationists out there going, oh, even ring species were debunked. There's no such thing. And that was just, again, a bastardization of what they wanted to to read into what Coyne was saying.
Okay, let me give you an example of that.
But they're not pure ring species.
Things tend to be a lot more complicated than our illustrations, which are intended to simplify them. So I got into a discussion with this professor of philosophy who is very snooty, and I'm not sure he doesn't know exactly what I look like because he was looking at me down the end of his nose. But he told me, yeah, he told me that Daniel Dennett said that the mind does not, in fact, exist, and that Daniel Dennett does not exist because the mind does not exist. And this is what Dennett said. And so I have to agree with Dennett because Dennett is an atheist who believes the mind and that Daniel Dennett does not believe that he himself exists. Now, of course, I have to go back and say, what the hell is he referencing? I mean, I know Dennett, but I mean, no, I still got to go figure out what is he talking about? What did he get so wrong? And eventually I found it. And of course, Dennett didn't say anything like that. Surprise, surprise. He said, the mind does not exist in any one single part of the brain. There isn't a part, an individual location of the brain in which the mind exists. Now, if you stop it there, maybe you could translate it. But I think we can already see that it's not fair to say that the mind does not exist.
No.
The mind is
not at all.
The mind is the total.
It's an emergence.
It's exactly. It's an emergent property of the totality of the brain, of all of its functions, all the data that it produces in the memory regions and everywhere else. That's the fair statement. The mind does exist. Daniel Dennett does exist, but the mind doesn't exist in one specific lobe.
Yeah, that's strange for philosophers.
Area. So this is how they misrepresent everything.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that most philosophers that I've talked to, and I do talk to quite a few, the one thing that seems to be in common is that the one thing you do know for certain is yourself. Everything else you can theoretically question. You can be a solipsist.
I'm not so sure anymore after last night.
But the one thing that you tend to agree, it's self-refuting to say you don't exist in some way, right? Even if
wouldn't it be great if we did our classes in education wouldn't it be great if we actually taught lessons where you have to give people an idea that in order to have an idea to have value, it has to be able to show its potential. Does your explanation work? Are you explaining an actual observation? What is the reason that you are suggesting what you're suggesting? And it can't just be because I want to believe I'm special. It's got to be something more than that.
Although that applies.
And how do we know if it's wrong? We can't ever prove it wrong. Then it's no good. Wouldn't it be great if people, because they're fine asserting empty nonsense that has no evidence to back it up, as long as you never prove them wrong. They don't need proof that they're right as long as you can never prove them wrong. But what if the reality is that in science, if you have no indication that you're right, you're wrong. That's it. You're done.
That's very true.
My hat's off to you, Aron, because I've only been doing YouTube for 6 months now, and in a very, very small compared to what you handle way, and I have already given up on humanity. How you've managed to go a decade and you're still in the middle of it, I think is impressive, and you might be a little crazy.
I will agree with you on the latter part. I mean, I am no, seriously, because we have things that we need to be doing, urgent, really heavily necessary things we need to be doing that we're just absolutely not. We're just not even touching the things that we're supposed to be doing. I don't know how to phrase this. It's like the island is sinking, and you have two sheep smashing heads, because that's what sheep do. They just bash their heads, and they're gonna reign supreme over the female, right? And there is no female. There's just a million wolves on a sinking island, and those sheep are still bashing heads. That's where we are. That's how oblivious.
That's a great analogy, though. I mean, I think what it and maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think today what our biggest problem is that everybody feels that they have their issue, and their issue is the most important. Everybody's on the extremes now, like whether it be feminism, alt-right, like everybody's moving out to such extremes now that everything that's not in their bubble is instantly against them, and that blocks any kind of working together or communication or bridging that gap. And the more that everybody is pushed to those extremes, the wider that gap is. And I think there's going to be a certain point where there will be no bridging that. And everybody,
I got to add that you are correct, but there's one other dimension that they've added. There's an extreme middle now.
Extreme middle?
Oh, that's interesting.
So is that like you've got a range here, and all of a sudden it's just extended out to the.
No. Here's what it is.
I'm okay.
I'm not on the left or the right. I'm in the middle, and I'm superior to both. of you.
Okay. I get you.
I'm not an atheist or a
theist.
theist. I'm an agnostic. And for them, the people who are saying it for this reason, they're not saying that, whether they're convinced or not convinced that a God exists, many of them don't give a shit one way or another.
Yeah.
They could believe, they could not believe. It doesn't matter. The point is they don't want to be associated with any religious believers for obvious reasons, and they don't want to be associated with specific atheists for obvious reasons. So they're going to pretend they're agnostic, so they don't have to identify with either group.
You know I'm agnostic, but
Interesting.
That's a ridiculous reason to be agnostic. I agree with you 1,000% on that.
But you understand what I mean, because it's especially obvious in the political scheme.
Yes.
Where people refuse to identify as left or right, and they know. And I've had people admit this, that they take the same battery of tests that I do. Any test you can find, any quiz of your political perspective, make up all the bullshit excuses you want about why it's not 100% accurate. We know there's nothing that's 100% accurate when we're trying to decide these things. We're trying to put things on a linear 2-axis scale. How accurate can it possibly be? But if the point is that if 6 out of 6 tests put you on the left, you're not in the middle.
Good point.
Well, I mean, I believe there's a
There's a little
bit of range, but I'm not a 50-50 kind of guy on those kind of things because.
But you understand what I mean? I mean, if every test puts you on the left, why don't you just up and admit you're on the left?
Yeah,
labels.
I get labels right and left a lot of times. But it's funny you're talking about Kyle, how people come to these things with their positions, thinking that their positions are the best and don't need to be worried about it. And I think that buys in the narrative of they think all opinions and all thoughts and all beliefs are equal, and that's bullshit. Especially in science, there are certain positions that I'm sorry, but you don't even get a seat at the table. If you're a creationist, if you're a flat earther, you're homeopathy, any of that crap. You don't even get a seat in having a discussion when it comes to science, because that is so far out of the range of science that
I don't know.
There is no equality in beliefs. There is science, and then there's you're fucking wrong. You're fucking wrong doesn't get the status.
Those are the people that should be at the table, though. I think those are the people that should be there listening to how people come to these, instead of getting their information from their echo chambers and InfoWars and these conspiracy threads. They need to be, I think, in some cases, the ones who actively want to, find the truth, pulled in and shown, like, okay, maybe we should go, walking through how you come to these conclusions. And I think there are certain cases where people get into this. It's a us versus them thing, and when they come with a different idea, it's instantly shut down, and that pushes them back further into their, delirious ways of thinking.
Those are
so I don't know how. Yeah, I know it's rare. I know that's rare, but how do you navigate that, though? I mean, how can you determine if somebody's genuinely looking for an answer, or you're just being trolled? Especially on here. I mean, we deal with people every day that dinosaurs don't exist.
Yeah, that's my biggest complaint too, is the lack of sincerity.
Yeah,
it's not just the problem that these people don't care what the truth is, that it's become so prevalent that you can't tell who cares what the truth is, and
right.
who even is lying against their own position. I had an argument with this today. Somebody on Twitter was saying things that were so absurdly ridiculous, I could not possibly take that guy seriously. And so I thought better about it. I was just going to block him. I'm like, you are just trying to waste my time on purpose. But then I thought better about it, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you an answer. And I don't think you're going to be able to deal with this because it disrupts everything you're telling me. But here's the answer. And he surprised the hell out of me when he said his response to my response to him was to admit that he had no idea what he was talking about. And he appreciated my time.
Huh.
I didn't see that coming.
That is something that rarely happens, though. You rarely hear, no. That's another problem. People, they're scared of saying, I don't know. They're scared of admitting to someone that they don't have an answer.
Wouldn't that be great if we could teach that
answer
first?
For every?
Let's teach that first. Do you know, right? Unless you can show to some degree. Here's the rule, because people will want to drag this out into hyperbole to say that I can't even prove that I existed 2 weeks ago. Right. Well, in addressing that kind of nonsense, if you can't verify the accuracy of your claims to any degree at all, by any means whatsoever, you don't know it.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. I'm not. I mean, knowledge has to be something that has to be true. You have to believe in it. You have to be able to justify it. If you miss out on the last part, that justification.